Hi all, this is another video I'm doing. Um, I want to talk about how to eat cheaply, how to meal prep cheaply, how to eat cheaply. Um, we live in a tough economy right now, and especially with everything that's going on with the government shutdown and SNAP going away, it's going to hurt a lot of people. So I just want to share a little bit of my experience with how I've grew up and how I learned how to cook and eat on a budget and to eat healthily and to eat till I'm full and to do so without really tanking my budget. Um, and I know this channel is more about exploring and getting out and being adventurous, but you got to pay for that. It's not free. And so some of the other things I'm coming about discussing is how do you live well and how do you live modestly? The idea being, if we get our budget tight and we're eating well on a budget, that's money that we can save up to do things that matter, like paying down debt or paying up for a cool trip or saving up for some nice gear, whatever that looks like, right? So that's why it's important. And I want to share a little bit about my personal backstory. Um, the picture really has nothing to do with it. It's just a piece of fish that I found at the supermarket, and we'll get into it later. But I want to share a little bit about my backstory. I come from an immigrant family. I'm mixed, half white, half Chinese. My dad grew up in China before he came to the States, and he grew up as a rural farmer, um, lower class, very very poor. He came up rough. Like something I was told is he told me that he didn't sleep in his first bed until he was in high school because they sent him to a boarding school. He actually worked on his family farm and slept on a bale of hay every night until he was in high school. That was the only time he got a real bed. So that's just an example of how he grew up, and he grew up rough. Um, and you know, him being my father as a 21st century middle class American, it's a very different lived experience, right? And so, now he doesn't live that lifestyle anymore, but he knows how to live within his means and to be content with not that much. And so he taught that to me. And so even though that's not my lived experience, I was influenced by it growing up during the recession and growing up during some hard times in our family. Um, I learned some things from him, and I want to share that with you all. Um, our family, like I said, middle class Americans, we were blessed where we had enough. We didn't have a lot, but we had enough. And we went through some hard times, and a big thing for our families, we did our best to not go into debt. So we really didn't get to do much. We didn't get to go on vacations. Very rarely do we ever go on a vacation. We didn't really eat out very often. So I feel like growing up, I missed out on a lot of things that my friends got to enjoy. And so I haven't gotten to enjoy these things until later into adulthood, where now I'm working full time and I'm making my own money and my parents don't have to support me. Um, so yeah, now we're in a position where we can enjoy some nicer things here and there, but really that root of not needing much to be happy and to make a lot with little, that's always been a part of our family. And um, now I'm in a place where I live this way in my day to day so that I can enjoy nice things. I'm not a stingy guy, but I'm resourceful, right? I eat well on a budget throughout my week, my work week, and such, so that I can go out and try an experience that's unique. I can go, if I go on a date, I can take my date somewhere nice and have a really fun date that I'm paying for. And I don't have to worry about the money because I've planned for it in my budget weeks leading up to that. You want to take care of the people that are in your life. You want to give money to your church or to charitable causes you care about, right? You want to be able to take care of people and serve others. And so it comes with some sacrifice. But that sacrifice doesn't have to be miserable. If you know what you're doing, and if in some of this advice I'm sharing with you, you can make those smart moves and do it well. So, I'm going to talk about cooking. You know, my friends would say I'm a pretty good cook. I would consider myself. I never went to culinary school or anything like that. I did work in food service a little bit, but nothing crazy, right? I would consider myself very much like an amateur cook. But how I learned to cook when I was little is I would watch my dad. He stir fried a lot coming from China. So he never sat me down and said, all right, here's how you do this and that and that. But he would let me watch him in the kitchen. And he'd let me watch him and he'd let me experiment. I was kind of interesting, like growing up, it wasn't until much later in life that I didn't realize that most parents made their kids lunches for school. I didn't know that. In my household, because I learned how to cook pretty young and my parents encouraged that, they said, look, if you want to make something, we'll cook your dinner, but your breakfast and lunch, it's on you to make. We'll get you what you need as long as it's reasonably priced, but you're going to have to look to cook it on your own. And I don't know if that's right or wrong or whatever, but that's how I grew up. And it actually helped me become a pretty good cook later on. So I got to watch my dad and I got to experiment a little bit. And I had to be pretty resourceful, right? Because we didn't have a lot of money for me to blow on expensive ingredients and things. But, as I got older, so I learned a lot from cooking, from watching my dad and experimenting. I also learned a lot about cooking from being in Boy Scouts. Growing up, we were out in the woods with my buddies and we'd have to cook and that kind of thing. So you had to cook because you had to eat. So I learned that way. But I also, as I got older and I, had a phone and social media and this such, I found that Instagram and YouTube have actually been really good sources for finding ingredients that or not, excuse me, not ingredients, but like finding recipes that are interesting. And something I want to talk about with recipes is I don't believe in recipes. I don't believe in recipes. I don't believe in measuring anything. I eyeball everything, generally. Um, and what I find is that a lot of the dishes I cook, like curries or stir fries or soups, stuff like that, there's a lot of wiggle room. You can do a lot of experimenting. You don't have to be super precise to make something good. So that's just how my style. And I look at recipes as like training wheels. When I watch a cooking video or I read a recipe, I don't learn the recipe. I use it to learn a technique. And if you do that over enough time and you learn different cooking techniques and principles, you take the training wheels off and you just learn how to cook. So with that, cooking can also be kind of daunting because, you see ads for like, I don't know, I remember when I was a kid, I saw ads for like Slam Chops, right? But, you see all these nifty gadgets and whatever, and you really don't need any of that. If you have some basic kitchen stuff, right? Like a cutting board, some knives, pots, pans, some utensils, right? I also like a rice cooker. I like slow cookers. I like an immersion blender, right? But if you have some really basic stuff, you can cook just about anything or most things from a practical standpoint. You don't need a full kitchen set right away. You can add things to your collection as you find them useful. So that way you're not having a bunch of kitchen stuff you don't need. You're keeping it just to what you use and can use well. Another thing I find is a lot of good kitchen utensils, you don't need the newest, fanciest thing. A lot of thrift stores have these cooking items in good working order and they're cheap. I remember whether it's a thrift store or a garage sale, when I was in college, and I was an upperclassman, and I had my own apartment. A church friend of mine, she hosted a garage sale to raise money for an anti-human trafficking ministry she was supporting. So I wanted to come out and help, and she had a slow cooker that they were selling, a nice slow cooker for $3. So I bought it for $3 cash. Years later, I still have that slow cooker in my kitchen and I still use it. $3. It's great. So there's things like that. It's, yes, up front, it's an investment, but if you're smart about it, you can get a good kitchen setup for not a lot of money. And if you're saving money by meal prepping, you save 15 to 20 bucks by packing your own lunch versus going out to lunch. And going out to lunch once in a while with your work buddies is nice. I do it, but not all the time, not every day, every week, right? So if you do those kinds of things, you can pay off whatever upfront investment you're making in good kitchen gear. As far as getting actual food, there's a few ways I go about it, right? So I have this broken down by different types of food. So first are your staples, right? As an Asian guy, I just got to say, get rice. Get a lot of it too. Rice is cheap, it's filling, it's so easy to make. Rice cookers are super easy. You can look up the general rule of how you cook rice. You don't even need a rice cooker. If you're in a pinch, you can use a pot and a lid. But I do love my rice cooker. And so you can get rice, you can get a small bag, you can be like me and go to Costco and get a 50-pound bag and just work through that. Noodles are good too, right? And potatoes are nice, but you don't want to overdo it, right? You want to eat in moderation, but rice is always just a good shelf stable. You gotta love it. Another thing is with meats. Now, meats are interesting, right? Because it can be expensive. It can be really expensive, but it doesn't have to be. The thumbnail for this video is a piece of salmon I picked up this morning for $2. That's a lunch right there. I can cook that up with some seasonings and whatnot, and that's a lunch. And $2 for a piece of salmon, some rice, maybe some cooked veggies, way cheaper than buying an overpriced salad for 15, 20 bucks, But here's my advice for getting meat, right? There's a few things you can do. So one, I say don't shop at one store. Wherever you live, go and scope out all the different grocery stores. Because for me, I go to different stores for different things. Like we have Grocery Outlet. Grocery Outlet's great and has a lot of really affordable things. But you can't go in there with I'm gonna get this one thing in mind. Some things you can, but you got to go in there with an open mind and say, I'm just gonna see what I can get and see if I can make something cool with this. I find that these days Save Mart has really good deals on meat. But depending on where you live, it might be a different chain or whatever, right? So scope out what's in your area and find what works for you. What I also find is it depends chain to chain, right? It also depends operator to operator. A Save Mart in one location doesn't always mark down their products the same as a Save Mart in another location. They have different inventory sometimes. Sometimes they're priced a little differently. Sometimes they're trying to sell it off faster because of when they put it on the shelf, right? So another thing you can do as you're looking for meats is depending on the store and depending on the store's manager, sometimes the managers will put these stickers on the meat package where they take off an additional 30 to 50% or an additional $1 to $2 to $3, $4 off extra, right? And the idea behind that is they have a sell-by date that they need to get rid of it. And it's getting close, so they want to get rid of it faster. And they're willing to sell it at an even cheaper price if you're willing to buy it. And so I typically do that. And the thing with meat is so maybe it's close to the date you got to use it, but you buy that meat and then you either use it in the next day or two or you freeze it. And if you freeze it, typically meat can stay good in the freezer for up to a year, right? You hear about like hunters will go and they'll get like an elk or a deer or boar or whatever, and then they'll process it and then they live off of that for like a year, right? You can do the same thing with grocery store meat. Um, so you should be fine. Obviously, don't eat it if it's fishy. Don't eat it if you think it's going to go bad. But as long as you're careful about it, you stock it up. You freeze what you aren't going to use right away. And then when you're going to use it, maybe 2 to 3 days before, you bring it into your refrigerator, let it thaw safely, and then cook it up. And then you're good to go. Um, I'd recommend knowing for the different kinds of meat you want to buy, know what's a good price per pound, right? And this can depend on the type of meat, it can depend on the type of cut. Like, for example, with chicken. Chicken I find is pretty cheap. Um, just normal, not organic, whatever, fancy chicken. Look, if you have the expendable income to go to like, some bougie market and buy organic, free range, whatever chicken, hey, good on you. This video is probably not something that you need to really bother with then. This is more for someone who's like, hey, I'm just trying to make ends meet and live a decent life, right? So you can go and find some decent chicken. Let's say chicken thighs. I would say I can probably get decent chicken thighs for anywhere from less than $1 a pound to, well, under $2 a pound. You really should not be paying more than $2 a pound for chicken thighs. Um, Chicken breast, $2 a pound is decent. Sometimes you can get it for less than that, right? So it's good to know the different kinds of meat and to know when a sale is really a sale or wasn't it just a marketing tactic. So something interesting is today I was at a store that I normally go to buy my meat, and they had this thing, a promotion. They're saying, "Oh, 50% off all your meat." I'm like, whoa, that's great. But then if you go and you look at the actual price tags, they marked everything up. So in reality, the 50% it was really just what they normally charge for meat. It was a sales tactic. But then I went over to the manager sales section where they were trying to sell off some stuff quick, and I got a great deal, right? Like I never go to a steakhouse because I can get the same cut of steak for a quarter of the price or less, and I can cook it myself and enjoy it. Um, so know when it's a real sale or it's just a marketing tactic to try and just get you. But if you do find a good sale, and there's a lot of it, right, because they're trying to sell it off, like I said earlier, buy a bunch of it and freeze it. It might cost you a pretty penny now, but you stretch that over a month or 2 months or even 3 months, right? Because it stays good in your freezer. You save that money long term. And if you have good food that's prepared in your fridge, ready to go, you're a lot more likely to stick to that than just going and impulse buying, some fast food or stuff that, is fine once in a while, but you really don't need to be eating all the time. Other proteins I like to keep stocked on me, like let's say I just had a really busy week and I didn't get around to cooking. It's good to have some canned fish, right? Canned tuna, canned sardines, right? Lean sources of really healthy protein. You can serve it over rice, maybe put some sriracha on it or some hot sauce helps with a lot of things, it really does. So there's different ways you can go about it. Um, you can get nuts, right? So sometimes, like I know my dad, growing up, when we'd watch a TV show or a movie something at night, instead of popcorn, he'd sit there with some almonds or some walnuts or something, and he'd snack on those. I'd also recommend getting a reasonably priced protein powder. You don't need the fanciest thing. I know every like fitness influencer is trying to upsell like their brand of whatever. No, you can just find a decent protein powder, have a shaker bottle or two, and then you know what? Take it with you to work, right? Like I like to drink a bottle of protein powder on my way to work because I'm usually rolling out of bed. I'm in a rush in the morning. I don't have time to make a big breakfast. That's something that's nice. Or, maybe in the afternoon I hit a little bit of a slump. I'm a little bit hungry. Maybe I forgot to pack my lunch, whatever. I can just make a quick thing of protein shake. So, so that's my recommendation for that. Vegetables. So access to vegetables really depends on where you live, right? I know we hear a lot about food deserts, and that's totally a thing. I'm very blessed that where I live in Northern California, it's mainly agricultural land. So because of that, we have access to really good, cheap produce. So where I like to go is sometimes you can go to a grocery store, and some of them have better deals on produce than others. But what I'd recommend is if you have access to a produce stand or a farm stand, and I'm not talking like some bougie farmer's market, although farmer's market, depending on the vendor, you can get some pretty decent stuff. But if there's just like a farm stand, usually find them out in some farm field out in the middle of nowhere, right? But if you know of a good local produce stand where farmers sell their stuff directly, you can get some really fresh produce that's cheap and it tastes really good. And vegetables are important because you need to eat them. They're healthy. If you know how to cook them properly, they taste great. They're cheap and they add volume to their meals, right? They help you, along with a good source of lean protein, they help you make you feel full. So, like I said, if you're in a rural area, try to find a farm stand. Try to find a store that gets cheap produce. Another option, if you live in a more urban area, I know, like, for example, I have some friends in Boston. And so I visit Boston once in a while. I love it. It's one of my favorite cities on the East Coast. But in Boston, they have something called the Haymarket, where I forget what days of the week, but in the Haymarket, it's part of Boston. You have all these vendors that come out with their various, mainly fruits and vegetables. But what they're buying is a lot of it is surplus from grocery stores. So they're basically reselling it. And some of it you have to sort through it. And, a few pieces of fruit might be a little moldy here or there, whatever. You got to throw out some stuff. But you can salvage a lot of it and be safe and wash it all and right. But you can get some really cheap produce that's still good for the most part. So I love checking out the Haymarket whenever I'm in Boston. So that's so for y'all in the bigger cities, you might have something similar. I know, like, where I live, I like to visit San Francisco. I'm sure if you go to Chinatown in San Francisco, you can probably get some pretty cheap produce, as long as you know what you're getting. The other thing I'd recommend is learn how to cook what's in season, right? So if you buy crops that are seasonal, it's going to be cheaper, it's going to be fresher, and it also gives you an opportunity to experiment with your cooking and become a better cook, because then you got to adapt. Another thing is, if you have a friend that gardens or is a farmer, but mainly even just if they have some garden plots, like my dad, he loves to garden. Anytime I visit my parents, my dad always gets me a bag of vegetables because he's always growing something year round. Something's being harvested some time of the year, and he typically has way too much of it. So what is he doing? Well, he's giving it out. Sometimes gardeners will swap crops with other gardeners, and it's a fun thing. But, he'll give it to the neighbors. He'll give it to church friends. He'll literally give it to anybody and everybody. He'll give it a bunch to me and say, hey, give them out to your friends. People who garden often end up with way too much of one thing at a given time, and they want to give it away. So if they know that you cook it and you enjoy it, it's great. The last thing when it comes to produce, and this also applies for fruit. I'm going to touch on fruit briefly, but it's a lot of the same advice. You'll see in grocery stores that they'll have like pre-cut stuff, like pre-cut fruit, pre-cut watermelon. Don't buy pre-cut ingredients. Cut it yourself. You get more out of it. It's cheaper, way cheaper. It's fresher. Cut your own vegetables and fruits. The only exception is if it's something that's a real pain in the butt. Like, I'll give you an example. I used what's called garlic, right? Basically, just canned or jarred garlic that's pre-cut in water. I use that. It's easier. I hate cutting garlic. It's a pain in the butt. I pay a little more. It's cheaper. That's practical. But for the most part, pre-cut stuff is just not worth your time or money. Fruit, same advice for, like what I'd say with a lot of vegetables. It also applies to fruit. But what I'd recommend is fruit is really good to eat instead of candy. You know, if you need a quick pick-me-up or instead of dessert, yeah, you know what? Eat some ice cream once in a while. Live your life, right? But I find that good fruit really lifts my mood and is a good substitute for candy or dessert. You know, it's just good fresh fruit. Just tastes so good. And so and especially like after a hard workout or a hard day of physical labor or you come back from a hike or something, having some fresh cut fruit just hits the spot. It's great. So my last closing thoughts here are know what you want to buy in bulk and what you want to buy in small quantities, right? So like for me, I buy my rice in bulk because I know I'm going to use it all up. It's not going to go bad because one of the problems is like I shop at Costco a lot and Costco is great, but sometimes I don't need a certain thing in the quantities at which I buy it. And so then I overeat so that it doesn't go bad. So you shouldn't do that. However, Costco is great for something like dishwasher pods, where I can buy them in bulk for much cheaper. And I know I buy it once and I'm set for half the year or a whole year. So I would say certain stores where they sell in bulk, know what you want to buy in bulk. The rest, just buy it as you need it. And I'd say, keep track of your leftovers. Don't get in the habit of throwing away leftovers. If you take it home and you pop it in your fridge, remember it's there. Finish it while it's still good. When you want to eat out, I would say just eat out in moderation. Like, and the thing is for me is I want to eat out because it's an experience, right? Like, so for example, me living in California, I never go to Chipotle on my own. Like, sure, I'll go if like my boss wants to take me to a work lunch and talk about whatever. And she says, hey, we're going to go to Chipotle. Sure, that's fine. I'm good with that. I'm not above eating it. But I won't typically go there on my own because California has some of the best Mexican food outside of Mexico. And so for me, my thought is, why would I go to Chipotle when I could go to some stand in the middle of nowhere for a fraction of the price and get something that tastes way better? Or I can go to some hole-in-the-wall mom and pop shop and get something that tastes way better, right? As a general rule, I don't eat out for anything that I can make better or comparably at home. That's why I don't go to steakhouses. I can make a good steak that's about as good for not nearly the same amount of money. But there's certain things where it's like, you know what? I can't cook that, or I can't cook it easily, or I can't do it like they do it. And it's a new cultural experience, right? Trying Afghan food, something like that. I want to do it that way, and I'm willing to spend money on something like that. So going back to the start of this video, why do we do this? It's not to be stingy. It's not to anything like that. But it's to prepare. It's to save up money so that we can pay off debt, that we can stack up some savings, so that we can buy cool gear, so that we can plan for a vacation, so that we can, take a date or your girlfriend or whoever out on a nice date and make them feel special, take your mom out for Mother's Day, whatever, right? It's so that we can do things to take care of the people and things that matter to us in life and live life well without needing much. So that's that. I'm going to do some cooking tutorials some other time, and have some other topics that are kind of related to this, but I hope it helps.